Salut and welcome to another French GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. So in this particular video tutorial, we're going to look at how to tackle the reading aloud task, which is part of the French GCSE and iGCSE speaking exam as of the exams from 2026 for some exam boards. And of course, this is a new part of those exams for those particular exam boards too. So, just to introduce myself briefly, my name's Dhananjay Talwar. I studied French and Italian for my MA at the University of Cambridge from 2011 to 2015. And I've been a tutor in some form ever since that time, and a full time tutor for at least 6 years now. I'm really passionate about languages and language learning. I've learned more than 20 languages myself to different levels, at least 9 of those to fluency. And yeah, it's a big hobby of mine. I love impressing on students the benefits of learning different languages and teaching them techniques to allow them to learn languages more quickly too. So far, I've helped more than 500 students to achieve or exceed their target grade in French GCSE or iGCSE. As a tutor, I have, of course, tutored other languages as well, 8 of them so far for GCSE or iGCSE, and some at higher levels too. Okay, this is just a recap of the French GCSE and iGCSE exam boards quickly. So the 4 exam boards as of July 2025, at least for GCSE French, and 2 for iGCSE French. Now, this particular video is centered on the reading aloud task. And that's quite a specific task because it is only there for these 2 exam boards in bold here, which are AQA and Pearson edXL GCSE. So if you're studying those 2 exam boards and doing your exams from 2026 or after that, then, so the new format, then of course keep on watching. This will be very useful, particularly as the reading aloud task is actually new and has only just been put into the speaking exam for those 2 exam boards. However, this reading aloud task is not yet, or not currently, part of the exams for the other exam boards here. Okay, so the reading aloud task, which of course is for AQA and Pearson edXL GCSE currently, is a task, that only exists for those particular exam boards. So it's only there for certain exam boards. It takes place always towards the beginning of the speaking exam. So it's not necessarily the first part of your speaking exam. It is for Pearson edXL GCSE, I believe. But for AQA, it would come after the role play. The student must read a short passage out loud in French. Naturally, that's why it's called the reading aloud task. And of course, this is very new too. So many students will feel daunted by this. It's important to remember that, it's simply another part of the exam. You can prepare for it just like everything else. Of course, it means that pronunciation is now potentially more important than it used to be. And of course, you can practice for the reading aloud task by practicing speaking French out loud and working on your pronunciation. Many students might also be concerned that they don't sound like an authentic French person or a native speaker from France or from any other French-speaking country. And that's not what's expected. So just to reassure you, that is not what's going to be expected of you when doing the reading aloud task. You don't have to sound like a native. Although it is possible for non-natives to have a native accent and without any foreign accent. It's difficult. It takes time usually. So you don't have to. You would be marked according to the accuracy of your pronunciation. So you'd be marked down if you mispronounce a word or a symbol or sound. For example, if you pronounce the word for a city, ville, like the word for life, vie, then you would be marked down because, you could lose marks because it sounds like you're saying something else. But apart from that, you do not have to have a perfect French accent. You don't have to have a perfect French accent at all. The emphasis is on the accuracy of your pronunciation and making sure that your French is comprehensible, so somebody would be able to understand what it is you're trying to say. And then, as a student, after reading the passage out loud, you'd have to answer a few follow up questions, which will always be based on the same topic area. So, like everything else within the speaking exam, the reading aloud task is based on a particular topic area. The number of follow up questions does vary. So, for AQA, I believe there's four follow up questions, whereas for Pearson at Excel GCSE, there would only be two. Okay, here are some of my top tips for the reading aloud task. It is, of course, new, so many students are going to be unfamiliar with this kind of task. Even if your school has prepared you well, I would therefore recommend spending a bit more time practicing these newer elements of these exams, which you may not have familiarity with. There are not too many sample materials available at the moment. So, yeah, you can find other ways to practice as well. Anything that allows you to practice your pronunciation in French, reading French out loud, potentially even getting used to hearing French. Because that can help with understanding the sounds and how each symbol corresponds to a particular sound as well. So that is the main thing to practice. And you could try to anticipate the follow up questions too. Within your preparation time, your 10 to 15 minutes of preparation time, you will have your reading aloud task with you or your reading aloud task card with you. And while the follow up questions themselves would not be written on the paper, you may be able to try and anticipate or predict what may possibly come up as follow up questions. So I would spend a bit of time doing that during the preparation time, only if you have enough time to do so, and if you've managed to prepare everything else as well. When you do answer those follow up questions, make sure you expand on your answers so you're not giving one word answers or very short, brief answers, and try and use a range of tenses or topic specific vocabulary as well, avoiding just using, say, simple tenses like the present tense, for instance. Okay, now it's time for me to show you some examples. Of course, these tasks are new, so there's slightly less. Well, there's less sample material, potentially slightly less information out there. But if you're unsure of anything to do with these newer elements of the speaking exams, or French GCSE or iGCSE, then I highly recommend checking out the website of your exam board and trying to get as much information as possible from there. So this first example comes from the sample material, of course, for AQA, for a foundation tier paper. So the student would, of course, start off by reading out this text in French, which I'll do for you just as an example. So, le collège commence à 8 heures. J'étudie beaucoup de matières et j'aime bien ça. À la récréation, je parle avec mes amis. Mon copain est très intelligent. Plus tard, il veut travailler en France. As mentioned, you don't have to sound like a native speaker at all. The emphasis is on not making mistakes with the pronunciation. For example, if you were to pronounce the letter H, which is silent in French, then you could be penalized. If you were to, say, pronounce the N at the end of words like copain, so you pronounce it like copain instead, that's a mispronunciation, so you could be penalized for that, for instance, as well. But you do not have to sound necessarily exactly like a native speaker. You would then, for AQA, have to answer 4 follow-up questions on the same topic. So for this particular example, it would be based on education and work. And I'll give you an example of that now too. Okay, so this is an example of the 4 follow-up questions based on the sample material. So in red, those are the questions themselves that the examiner would ask. In blue, those are my ideal answers, suggested answers that I've given for every single one of those questions. And I've translated everything into English as well. That's all in brackets. So I'll give you a bit of time to look through this. And I'll just point out some of the features of these ideal answers that I've provided here. So you can see that I've tried to mix up my tenses a little bit. I've actually kept these answers relatively simple. I haven't gone into huge amounts of detail. I've certainly expanded beyond just one word or one phrase. However, I could potentially even expand more. I believe even going up into 2 or 3 sentences per answer should be absolutely fine. Yeah, it's generally safer to say more rather than too little. Um, yeah, so at least 1 to 3 sentences per answer. I have mixed up my tenses slightly. For example, for this second question, I've used a C clause, C followed by the imperfect tense and then the conditional tense. I've also used the subjunctive form, present subjunctive, bien que ça soit très difficile. Soit is the present subjunctive from être. I've used some other more complex structures too, like après être rentré, yeah, which translates as after having come back home, literally. Another C clause in the third answer as well. So I have tried to vary my language, especially the grammar, somewhat, to impress the examiners more. And the other thing I've been very careful to do is make sure that the answer relates exactly to what the question itself is asking. So I've tried not to go off on a tangent or go too far away from what the question is asking in order to maximize the marks. Okay, one more example. This second example comes from Pearson at Excel. This is a higher tier paper. So again, just as an example for you, I'll read out the passage as the student would have to do in the exam. So, j'essaie d'être en bonne santé. Je mange beaucoup de fruits et de légumes et je bois de l'eau. J'évite de manger des frites et de la viande rouge car je pense que c'est malsain. Demain, mes amis vont manger dans un restaurant, mais moi, je vais aller à la piscine. Okay, for Pearson at Excel GCSE, once you've read out the specific passage, you would be asked just 2 follow-up questions. Again, the 2 follow-up questions will be based on the same topic area as the mini passage itself. And it does warn you here to say more than just a few words, or to say more than one-word answers, at least when answering those follow-up questions. Okay, so here are the examples of the follow-up questions for Pearson at Excel GCSE, along with my model answers. The questions themselves, again, are given in red, and my model answers are below in blue, and in brackets are the English translations for everything. So I'll give you a bit of time to read through this again. I'll just point out some of the features, things that I've tried to include. So I've tried to include different tenses. Even though the first question, est-ce que tu aimes aller à la piscine? Do you like to go to the swimming pool? It doesn't specifically ask, well, it doesn't prompt any other tenses. It's a very general question in nature. It would be very natural to just reply in the present tense. But I've tried to vary my tenses. And in order to do that, I've talked about the past. So the fact that I went to the swimming pool last weekend, just to be able to use different tenses, like the perfect tense as well. Apart from that, I've made sure the content of my answer is relevant to the question itself as much as possible. I've used the present subjunctive form here, soit, again, present subjunctive from the verb être. In the second answer, I've used the conditional, même si j'aimerais, and ce serait, just to avoid only using the present tense. And I've expanded my answer generally beyond just one sentence. So these are the features to try and incorporate into your answers for the follow-up questions of the reading aloud task, if you can. Okay, now a mini quiz just to test your understanding of this reading aloud task. So firstly, question 1, how can you practice for the reading aloud task? I'll give you a bit of time to think through what you might answer and then show you the answer I've written. Okay, I'm going to show you the answer now. So practice French pronunciation. Above all, that's what's being tested, which never actually used to be the case for French GCSE or iGCSE. And reading French out loud as well. That's great practice, getting used to how certain letters sound or combinations of letters sound in French. French is not a phonetic language. It's not spelt exactly how it's pronounced, which means that it's likely to take just more practice and more time to get used to pronouncing it well and being able to read it out loud. Okay, question 2. So this is true or false. The reading aloud task consists of two short passages. Okay, I'm going to give the answer to this now. So this is false. Actually, the reading aloud task only contains one quite brief passage. And that's true regardless of which exam board you're taking, whether it's AQA or Pearson at Excel GCSE. The reading aloud task would have just one passage, which is quite brief. Slightly shorter for foundation tier than it is for higher tier, but it would still be quite brief. Okay, question three, so true or false again. The follow-up questions for the reading aloud task will move on to different topics, other topics. Okay, let me reveal the answer now. This one is also false. So the follow-up questions are going to be based on the same topic area as the mini passage itself for the reading aloud task. So that's to be expected. If your reading aloud task is about food, for example, the follow-up questions would also be on food. If your reading aloud task is about the environment, then the follow-up questions are also going to be about the environment. So you may not be able to predict the exact questions, but you may be able to think ahead in your preparation time and get some idea of what you could encounter as follow-up questions. Okay, and question 4. Do you have to sound like a native speaker to get full marks in the reading aloud task? Interesting question, because I predict that many students will be wondering this. Okay, I'm going to share the answer now. So no, you don't have to, because that would be very, very tough on students if they had to sound like exactly like a native speaker or close to that to be able to get full marks for the reading aloud task. Of course, your pronunciation is being tested, so you do have to pay more attention to your pronunciation than you would perhaps have done before. But the most important thing is that your French is comprehensible and that the examiner is clearly able to understand what you're trying to say. The other thing to be careful of course, is clear mistakes in the pronunciation. Things like the letter H should not be pronounced in French at all. Combinations of letters such as GN would be pronounced gne normally in French. So if you make mistakes in terms of these sorts of things with pronunciation, then you can be penalized. But as long as your French is comprehensible and there are not very clear mistakes in terms of pronunciation, you can still score highly. Okay, if you have any questions at all regarding any of this, or if for more information about more personalized help that I also offer, this is how to get in touch. You can contact me through email, via Facebook or Instagram. I do post on Facebook, Instagram, and also LinkedIn every single day with tips for French GCSE and iGCSE, how to maximize your grade, how to prepare for the exams, how to plan for your revision, and sharing my love of languages with the world as well. I have many resources, including free resources available, including for French GCSE and iGCSE, and a Facebook group for all students of French GCSE or iGCSE and their parents too. I also do one-to-one classes, groups, and courses as well. So if you'd like to access any of this, just get in touch.